Respect isn't earned by demanding it. It's earned the moment you become the kind of person who doesn't need to say a word to get it. That's what most people miss. Respect isn't the result of yelling louder, being nice, or constantly proving your worth. Respect is the silent shift that happens when someone realizes you're not to be messed with. Not because you threaten them, but because your presence says it all. Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people refuse to accept. People don't respect kindness without boundaries. They test it. They push it. Eventually, they take advantage of it. That's why you can give someone your last bit of energy, time, or attention, and they'll still treat you like someone they can use. Not because they're bad, but because they're human. People respond not just to kindness, but to strength. Not just to generosity, but to self-discipline. And strength doesn't mean aggression. It means certainty, knowing your boundaries and defending them. Even if it makes others uncomfortable, it means not chasing approval and not being afraid to walk away from what doesn't align with your vision. That subtle shift is enough to change the entire dynamic between you and the world around you. You don't have to yell to be heard. You don't have to prove yourself to be respected. But you do have to act like someone who isn't afraid to lose people who don't value you. That's where most people lose the game. They cling, they over-explain, they fear being misunderstood, and in that moment, they lose their power. You win the second you let go of the need to be liked. That's when people start to notice you're different. They feel it. The energy changes. You're not chasing connection anymore. You're choosing it. You're not tolerating disrespect. You're removing it. Quietly, calmly, completely. That's where Machiavelli's insight becomes gold. He wasn't teaching cruelty, he was teaching clarity, strategy. How to read the room, how to hold yourself with discipline, how to know when to act and when to stay still. That's power, that's respect. And it only begins the moment you stop trying to be good just to be loved. There's a reason why the quietest person in the room usually holds the most authority. It's not about volume, it's about intention. When you stop reacting to everything around you, when you stop rushing to defend yourself or explain your every move, people start leaning in. The curiosity grows. Why didn't they flinch? Why didn't they respond to that insult? Why do they seem so unfazed? That calm, unfazed energy is intimidating. Not because you're trying to scare anyone, but because control is rare. And in a world where most people operate from insecurity, the one who doesn't is the one everyone pays attention to. Here's the truth. People will always test your boundaries. They want to know what you'll tolerate, and they'll keep pushing. Not because they hate you, but because they're trying to figure out how far they can go. It's not personal, it's instinctual. But the moment they realize you won't budge, everything changes. The disrespect stops. Not because you demanded it, but because they know there are consequences. And those consequences don't have to be loud, dramatic, or aggressive. Sometimes, the most powerful consequence is silence, distance, disinterest. People don't fear losing access to you when you're always available, when you always explain, when you always forgive. They fear losing you when your standards are clear and you never compromise, when you don't need anyone, when access to your time and energy is earned, not assumed. Machiavelli wasn't writing for bullies. He was writing for thinkers, for those tired of being walked on, for those exhausted by being overlooked, for those who felt they had to shrink themselves just to avoid conflict. He knew real power wasn't in revenge, it was in self-mastery, in balance, in knowing exactly who you are and not needing anyone else to validate it. And when you step into that, when you stop chasing their approval and start moving from self-respect, something strange happens. People start treating you better, not because you changed them, but because you changed what you allow. Here's the wild part. The people who get disrespected the most are often the ones who bend the most to avoid it. Sounds backward, right? But it's true. The harder you try to be liked by everyone, the more people sense they can get away with things. And when they sense that, they test you. Subconsciously, they think, if they let that slide, what else will they tolerate? But here's the shift Machiavelli understood. When you stop making being liked your priority and replace it with self-control, people stop seeing you as someone they can play. You don't walk into a room trying to impress. You don't oversmile. You don't fidget. You just exist, with energy, calm. That kind of energy speaks louder than any clever comeback or fake dominance. It's not about having power over others. It's about mastery over yourself. The secret? Silent boundaries. You don't have to yell, "Don't talk to me like that." You just raise an eyebrow once. Stay silent. You don't have to explain why their behavior is unacceptable. You simply reduce access. That's subtle. That's graceful. That hits harder than any argument. You start noticing. The people who made jokes at your expense stop when you stop laughing. The ones who guilt-tripped you back into things back off when you calmly say, "That doesn't work for me." No story, no excuse, just a calm rooted in self-worth. Machiavelli didn't advocate being ruthless for ego's sake. He advocated calculated strength, not letting your emotions write checks your reputation has to cash. The true art of not being disrespected isn't about pushing people away. It's about commanding such quiet certainty that no one dares cross a line you've never even spoken aloud. That's the energy that makes people wonder, what happens if I cross this line? And often, that wondering is enough to keep them in check. You don't earn respect by asking for it. You earn it by needing it less, and that changes everything. The mistake most people make is thinking disrespect starts with the other person. It doesn't. It starts with you, with what you tolerate, what you stay quiet about, what kind of energy you allow in your space. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. That true power isn't something you shout, it's something you carry. In the decisions you're unafraid to make, in the distances you're willing to create. It's when someone crosses a line and you don't react emotionally, you just make a mental note and act accordingly when the time comes. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Let's make it practical. Someone makes a passive-aggressive comment. Most people either awkwardly laugh or throw shade back. But the power move? Stillness. Eye contact. No reaction. That silence creates discomfort. And in that discomfort, the other person is forced to face their own behavior. When you constantly explain yourself, justify your values, over-apologize, you subconsciously lower your social value. You communicate uncertainty. You signal that you're not sure of your own worth, and when people sense that, they treat you accordingly. Not always consciously, but slowly, they slip from respect into dismissal. Now compare that to someone who moves with intent, who speaks only when they have something to say, who doesn't overshare just to be liked, who isn't afraid of silence, because silence, when used correctly, is power. That kind of person doesn't chase respect, they embody it. You don't need to puff your chest, you don't need to raise your voice, you just need to stop participating in nonsense. The moment you start treating your attention like currency, everything changes. You stop replying to weird energy. You stop explaining yourself to people who already made up their minds. You stop chasing closure that was never coming. And people feel that shift. They realize your approval isn't easily won anymore. And the twist? That's when they finally start respecting you. Not because you demanded it, but because you no longer needed it. Machiavelli would say, to be feared is not about cruelty. It's about being understood. Clearly, they need to know what you will and won't tolerate. Not because you told them, but because you showed them, consistently. That's the difference. That's what makes people think twice before crossing you. And once you learn to carry yourself like this, you never have to raise your voice again. What makes people take you seriously isn't your volume. It's not your words or your titles. It's your response, especially when tested. Not when life is calm, but when there's chaos. That's when people watch. That's when they measure who you really are. Machiavelli studied power in its rawest form, and a pattern became clear. People don't respect perfection. They respect clarity. They respect the one who knows who they are, who doesn't flinch when challenged, who doesn't beg for peace in environments that run on chaos. That kind of person commands respect, even in silence. Here's the catch. Setting boundaries isn't enough. You have to maintain them. Not once, every time. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because the moment you bend your standards to keep the peace, you silently teach others that you never really believed in them. And people don't respect what you don't protect. Let's get specific. Ever walked away from a conversation and felt a tightness in your chest? Like you betrayed yourself? That was your intuition saying, you should have drawn the line. You gave away a small piece of your power for approval, for comfort, for the illusion of harmony. Machiavelli would tell you this: stop trying to fix how others see you. Fix how you see yourself. Because when you truly start respecting your values, your time, your presence, your energy, something powerful happens. You stop asking for respect, and people start giving it to you. Not because you changed how you talk, but because you changed the room. You stop tolerating fake friendships. You stop accepting people who only remember your worth when it benefits them. You stop treating your boundaries like a debate. You stop handing out access to unworthy hands. Because real presence, silent, rooted, steady, speaks louder than any argument. It tells the world, I don't chase, I don't beg, I don't repeat myself. The people who disrespect you once often do it again, to see if they still can. The moment they realize they can't, they either change or disappear. Either way, you win. You don't need to scare anyone. You don't need to yell. You don't even need a clever comeback. You just need to stop letting disrespect live in your space like background noise. And when you do, when your presence becomes a standard instead of a negotiation, something incredible happens. They never look at you the same again.